Welcome, John. Great to see you, man.
Thank you, Ken. It's great to be here. I
Yeah, well,
appreciate you having me.
no problem, and I'm so glad I got finally got you on the podcast. And you know, I guess I'll start off with you're a communications expert, both for individuals, for corporations. I mean, why is this so important, especially today?
Well, I was thinking about that just yesterday. I was writing something up, and one thing that really bugs me is when people say they are self-made people. Oh, that
Right,
he's a self-made, whatever.
right,
Okay, no way. Sorry. Like it started with your mom having you, you know, and that took dad too. And then all the stuff along the way. So what dawned on me about that is that, nothing and no success that anyone ever achieves is achieved by itself.
right,
And when you're with human beings trying to accomplish something, the one constant across countries and companies and verticals and all that is communication. So it's why people like Dale Carnegie and Warren Buffett and a whole bunch of others have said if there's one skill to have, it's that skill of public speaking. And I would say not just public speaking, but to really understand communication and influence so that you can be the best leader and contributor to
right.
teams that you can be.
So how did that become like your life's mission? I mean, because I'm sure it didn't start there, and I thought I read somewhere that you might have had a stumble in this area at some
Oh,
point,
dude,
right? So
so many stumbles.
yeah, so how did this happen? How did you end up being one of the most prolific, TED coaches out there?
Well, I was always the guy initially who had the soft skills, and I
Mm,
worked with a lot of people who had the hard skills, and I was really jealous of them
right.
because I worked in the .com arena starting in 1994. And I would go out and with my various teams, I raised several $100 million in Silicon Valley and beyond. Now, admittedly, I never had a really successful exit. I can share all the stuff I learned, you know, but so, I was bringing in millions and they still called what I did fluffy. And so I just had this chip on my shoulder and I, went around trying to prove I was valuable while I didn't think I was. And then in 2009, I went to the TED conference for the first time and saw person after person give the most amazing speech I'd ever heard. I was just like, wow, this is totally amazing. And I had two big insights. One is that's really powerful. Public speaking like that is really powerful. And I have not been doing that. I was always one of those guys, maybe like you can, certainly like our friend Nick. I was always one of the better speakers at the conference, if not the best. But when I was at TED, I realized, oh, that's not because I was so good. That's because the bar was so low, you
Right,
know?
right.
So I came back from that TED experience and I got really, really involved in the TED and TEDx community. And at one of the first ever TEDx events, TEDx Santa Monica, I was part of the volunteer team that was putting it on. And we had this guy who had all the hard skills in the world. He was the one I was looking forward to seeing the most that day. And when he got up on stage and started to speak, everybody in the room just checked out because he was so nervous and awkward. We all thought we were going to throw up. And it was so sad. I was just so, so, so sad. And then after a couple minutes of being sad, because I just seen that so much, right? These people who have so much to offer and so much education and all that, but they can't quite close the gap in those communication moments. And then the evil part of me popped out. And I remember sitting there quietly to myself going,
I can do
ah,
better.
right, yeah,
Right?
hard skills guy's blowing it,
Yeah, yeah.
he calls what I do fluffy, neener.
Right, right,
Oh, I was loving it for a minute,
right.
And then my buddy walked over and he leaned down and he totally changed my life. He said, "Dude, we got to do something to help people like this." And it was one of the biggest aha moments I've ever had in my life. Like the clouds parted, the angels sang, the lightning struck, and I realized that if I just got over myself for 5 freaking minutes, I could totally make a difference for that guy. If I stopped honoring the chip on my shoulder and just got rid of that, and started honoring the people right in front of me. So that's when I went home and started working on what I now get to do all over the world, deliver all over the work with people on. I started creating what the core training, I called it the Speak Like a Leader Boot Camp, which maybe I could do better, but
No, I love
with the
it.
name. All right.
I'm
So
ex-military, so boot camp kind
well,
of
there you
rings
go.
for me.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And, and I say I'm the drill instructor for your greatness.
There you go.
So, gives me a great place to stand. But that's when I started working on that. And what I did totally differently than I would have otherwise is I realized if I wanted to make a difference for that guy and people like him, I would have to base everything I did in human evolutionary biology and human neurophysiology so I could show people not only what works, but also why it works based in science. And it turns out that there's at least two great things that come out of that. The first one is everybody wants to know why, not just hard skills people. Everybody wants to know why. And when people understand why something works, they can go get better and better and better and better and better because they understand what they're doing. It's not just some kind of lucky thing that they have, which is what I find with a lot of salespeople. They're doing a lot of the stuff that I teach, but they don't understand why it works. And when they understand what's going on, they can get even better at it.
So
And
you're
for
taking
people,
people. Oh, sorry, not to interrupt, but you're taking people from. If someone finds it intimidating, I think a lot of times if they look at something as completely as an art, right, as a creative
uh-huh,
endeavor or something, and go, well,
yep,
I'm not wired that way, and it's like, well, wait a minute, there's a science
right,
behind it, and you can learn the
yes,
science behind it, right?
yeah, dude, I love it. There's science and there's craft.
Right.
And I think one of the things we've learned, at least I've learned over the last 20 years with the craft beer revolution, is that when you bring craft to something and you just care about your craft, wow, does stuff get good,
Right.
And
Right.
then same thing with the science, right? Yes, I think there's an art, but I don't think that there's no one on earth that is not an artist at this,
Right.
because communication's so important that if you didn't genetically have what it took to be a great communicator, your gene pool would have been plucked out a long time ago, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when you think of it like a craft and you get that there's science to it, and then you bring yourself to it, that's an unbeatable combination.
So when you guys started this, so was it you and a partner, or because you said you had a buddy that came
Yeah.
up to you? Yeah.
Yeah. No, he came up to me, and he's still a good friend, but we didn't partner. We kind of ended up, he was already doing some other stuff in the arena, pitch coaching mostly.
Got it.
Um, so we did some things together, but he already had a company, and he, so I was much smaller fish to fry at the time. So I went and did my own thing. Um, but the question was,
Oh no, so I guess where I'm going is, so this was 12, 13 years ago, and I like kind of
yeah,
building the chronology of events here. So you
yeah,
started doing this around 12 or 13 years ago. Started with what, individuals, with corporations? Like, how did you get going with it?
boy, dude, you know that story, burn the boats?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Entrepreneurs always say that, right?
uh,
Burn the
yeah,
boats, right?
yeah.
So there's no way back but victory. Well, I didn't have the courage to burn the boats, but I had started to dabble with this. And then all of a sudden, everything else I was doing just dried up. Like and so for most of my life, I was 50 grand in debt, consumer debt, not good debt, 20, 30, 40, 50, whatever. And, and I was working for too much stock and not enough actual cash, too many stock options at companies that were never going to get liquid. And so all of a sudden everything dried up, and I had just gotten married, and I was like, holy crap, And so I sat and cried about it for a while. And then I just started calling everybody I knew, connecting with everyone I could on LinkedIn, asking people if they knew anybody. And I got a couple of free gigs, that were free for me to do for these CEO groups. And that, I had a question. Since it's free, should I hold something back? And I was like, no, John, you know better than that, right? Go give them your absolute best. If you're going to do it anyway, just do your absolute best. So I went and gave my absolute freaking best. And then I started to get calls from them. And it was almost never from the person that was in the room. They would call me and they'd say, "Hey, I have a
I
buddy,
heard, yeah.
right, who heard you in that give that thing, and I could use you at my organization." So that's how it all started. And for the first year, Ken, I went more in debt. And then the second year, I kind of broke even. But then the third year, I made more than I ever made in my whole life before. And then I doubled that plus, and then I tripled that plus, and I've kind of been bouncing around in that arena since then. I think it's time for me to have another breakthrough with my finances and the company, everything. But, you know, it was not a quick, easy thing.
Right.
And I cried a lot of times so hard that boogers were running down my face, you know?
Well, I think it's cool that it was rooted in contribution, right? Like, and then how do I provide value, right? So how do I
Yeah.
come in and provide value? And so you focus now. So I've watched a couple of your TED Talks. You've got one with Dolph Lundgren that's pretty legendary, I think. And how did you
Yeah.
guys get hooked up?
Dolph Lundgren was speaking for TEDx Fulbright,
Mm-hmm.
and I was the speaker coach for that event.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, "Dolph, hey, here's John, which, we've got a speaker coach. We request that all our speakers work with him." So Dolph came in and he was really excited to do that. He wanted to tell his story, and boy, did we go deep with that.
Yeah.
Like I love that he was willing to just go all the way with that story. And um and I don't know if you saw it, but in one of the little in the little quote that he gave me, he's like, I had a I guess a big burly cop come up to me and shake my hand and say, "Hey man, I loved all your movies, like Rocky and everything." And then he said the guy's, eyes kind of filled up with tears, and he said, "But I love your TED talk even more."
Wow.
And that, to me, like, that was a successful TED
And
talk.
what, of course, it wasn't, without giving too much away, if you guys want to Google, TED Talk and Dolph Lundgren, and he just gets very vulnerable, right? Which is not,
Yeah.
you know, I knew him as Drago and this,
Yeah.
athletic guy and this huge guy. And
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was not what I was expecting. So check it out, guys. You're in
Yeah.
for a treat there. So talk to me about, like, who do you work with primarily now? Because I know you do online programs, you work with individuals. Like,
Yeah.
I know part of this, we've been focusing on the TED side where, you're obviously going to help someone amp up for the most important, talk probably of their life up till that point.
Yeah.
But then you also do help with communication programs for organizations as well, right?
That's actually where I make my money. I
Okay.
never have worked for TED. I've gone to TED. I know TED. TED knows me. They love me. I love them. They were fine with me writing my book, TED Worthy Leader, and all that.
Cool, cool.
But I never worked for them, and that's not where I make my money. I've been the official coach for a number of TEDx events, but that's either pro bono or very close.
Mm-hmm.
What I do is bring that ability to be TED worthy and the neurobiology of effective influence and communication and all that stuff. It's what I call leadership communications.
Right.
I bring that to organizations like NASA and Johnson & Johnson and Boston Scientific and, Abbott and just a bunch of those kinds of companies.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm usually working with the top couple of tiers of management. And I do one-on-one executive coaching a lot these days because of the COVID thing. I also have started to do a whole bunch more large and small group trainings as people have been coming back together again. It's really great to have some leadership or some growth and development program when people all come in and meet each other for the first time. It's nice to have a growth, a program of some sort that can kind of immerse everybody so they're not all so nervous about meeting each other, and give them an experience to go through together. Is very bonding. And, it's been really, really good to do that stuff as people have come back. So I do large and small group training. I do one-on-one coaching. And in 2023, I'm going to start creating some more packages that I can get to a broader audience. Because, right now I'm only impacting the people at the top of the organization. I want to make something that's a little more affordable, that still supports people, but is something that organizations could easily bring in at mid-level management, because the earlier that people get this stuff, the more it matters for the corporation and for
Totally.
the rest of their career.
Totally. I mean, one thing that I'm thinking of when I think about what you're doing, and I came up entrepreneur in my early 20s, sold a company to a large Fortune 500 company. Then
Yeah.
I went to work for them, and I've always had, the gift of gab. I'm not afraid to jump in front of a room. Never
Yeah.
really have been, at least since I was probably 30 years old or so.
Uh-huh.
And I noticed throughout my career that there were people that were very effective, and I know this is like your probably your core audience, but very effective in their job, right? Very good operators, very good
Yep.
executors,
Yep.
not great in a room. And there's these events that you have in the corporate world, I think especially, where maybe once a year you get invited to corporate, where and the
Yeah.
CEO's there and the CFO's there, and you have an idea, but you're not really sure how to get in there, and you're not sure how to gain alignment or get people to kind of maybe you make a couple of calls before you go out, and I kind of instinctively know that, but they
Yes.
don't, and it doesn't make me better. It's just this skill that you need, that you really need to get ahead, and all of a sudden see some people that are highly skilled, maybe their IQ's much better than mine, but they're kind of stuck at this level, and
Oh,
maybe I take a
totally.
level up, and trust me, there's people that have passed me as well, probably for similar
Sure.
reasons, right? That they've found a better way to communicate. So is what you're focused on now, like you're saying in these bigger corporate ones, trying to get down, like you're saying, to those people at say the general manager level, director level, that kind of thing?
Well, first of all, there are a lot of those people in kind of that second tier down,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So that are going to be pulled up pretty soon into that very top tier of management. And, people want to know their leaders.
Yeah.
So what'll get you to that second tier, the second from the top, the penultimate one, is not what's going to get you to the top one, right? People
Right.
have got to get a lot better at sharing themselves, telling their stories, that emotional connection, all of that stuff becomes really, really important the more you go up. And yes, I would love to get those people that if they had this skill at that stage in their life, in their career, they could not only contribute a lot more to having the company succeed, but they
Yeah.
could succeed themselves a lot more.
Totally, totally, John. Because one thing that I'm thinking of, and this may be the wrong terminology to put around it, but it's just what's always been in my head is that you've got to be your own best promoter in a way. And I don't mean promoter like puffing your chest out in significance and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
certainly making sure that your brand, for lack of a better word, within your company is being marketed in a certain way, right? And I
Yes.
remember, one thing that kind of rang with me when I was at a big corporation is everybody is a potential fan or a detractor. So the people that work in the travel department, the people that work in accounts payable and accounts receivable, and if you don't treat everybody correctly, right, and if you're not communicating with everybody the way you need to, then a dialogue or a narrative starts to form, good or bad, about who you are. People just have opinions, right? And I
Yeah.
think that I tried for most of my career to be aware of that at least, right? What is the
Yeah.
message? I think one of the I didn't know we were going to go exactly here, but I think one of the best traits an executive or a leader can have is being self-aware. I mean,
Totally.
you know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? As
Big
understanding,
thumbs up. Yeah.
yeah, where you stand, what's expected, and how people really actually perceive you. There's
Yeah.
times I've walked into a room and gone, these people think I'm an asshole, and here's why,
Yeah.
due to
Yeah.
circumstances, but it's important to know that, right? And
Yeah.
so, how can do you offer? I know you said you're working on some next tier stuff. Do you offer some stuff online that people can work on as well?
I do. Yeah. I've got a course called the Speak Like a Leader Boot Camp, and it is $875, and it is an absolute steal. So that is everything, all the fundamental, most important principles that I have in that course. And, The astronauts have done that course. People at Johnson and Johnson, like I got to train all the active astronauts. I pinch myself, but people at Johnson and Johnson, people at Accenture, people all over the world in these top leadership positions have done that course, and they all tell me basically the same thing. They say, first off, John, I didn't want to do it because I just resist online courses.
Oh, sorry, John. Sorry,
Okay.
John.
So I said, so they say, first of all, I didn't want to do it because it was an online course, and I just resist online courses. But when I finally did it, oh my gosh, it was so much better than I expected. It was kind of like going to the movies. It was really, really fun. And I see how I can apply all of that stuff right now to everything I'm doing. And
Very
the
cool.
reason for that, Ken, is because I had a great team help me create that course. Like it's my material, but boy, did they set that up so that it is a fun, really well done, excellent example of an online course.
And is that
So
something that someone like in this situation we were talking about, like up and coming through the ranks, can also take that course to help them find their voice?
yes, yeah. And I've gone out of my way to include a bunch of very short, very pithy PDFs and all that with each chapter, so that if people want to dig more deeply into a particular concept that interests them, or that they think, oh, this would really help me, let me, so it's one of those things that if you just do that course and you
Yep.
take on what's in that course,
Yep.
it'll fundamentally absolutely change your life, and you never have to talk to me a minute,
Awesome.
of your life. And that is also where everybody I've ever trained starts, is that online course. So Dolph Lundgren did that online course. Mike
Okay, so
Elliott
even
that
if
on,
they're paying the big bucks, it's like that's the foundational thing that they all start with.
that's what they all start with. The
Awesome.
only exception is sometimes organizations, they're going to have a number of leaders do this coaching with me. They'll say, John, will you come deliver that in person? So I can
Got
come
it.
deliver that in person and then give people access to the online course for study. But anybody that I'm going to work with or that I coach has to either do the online course or have me deliver that in person before we proceed
Got
on to
it.
coaching.
Got it. So for those that aren't that I mean, I think most of our listeners are familiar with TED Talk. So I guess to me, in a TED Talk, there's a level of gosh, what's the word? Vulnerability or authenticity that I see in TED Talks. The best ones,
Yes.
anyway, right? And the ones that do
Yes.
well.
The ones that are really good. Yeah.
Yeah, like Dolph's. Like you see who they really are. You see them kind
Yeah.
of, open up their wounds a
Yep.
little bit. And they don't seem crafted. I mean, they are because they're friggin' perfect. And Dolph Lundgren is not a public speaker. So what is the process of getting someone that good? I mean, to have a 15-minute speech that they never seem rattled and they're not looking at any notes and it's just from the heart, yet at the same time executing the whole time. How do you get them there? I mean, I know that's a big
What?
question, but
So, I mean, there's a fundamental answer that no one's going to want to hear.
right.
I didn't want to hear this answer, but it's just the real answer.
Yeah.
So when I went to TED, I still thought those people were just so brilliant they were getting up and winging it. They were absolutely not doing that. Like everybody that speaks at TED, they have been practicing that TED talk under close supervision from TED for at least a year.
Wow.
Maybe some of them get away with 6 months, but no way any less than that, you know? And then I found out my buddy worked with Steve Jobs on all those great speeches that he gave. And he said, John, after we completed the speech, Steve would commit to practicing it for an hour for every minute he was going to be on stage.
Wow.
And do you know where he got that idea from? Winston Churchill.
Oh, wow.
So the bottom line is, I think we call Steve Jobs a natural communicator because we don't want to work as hard as he worked to be that good.
So meaning that, yeah, God, I should pause there. That's a really good statement that you just made there, because people do say that a lot, because I do think everyone looks at everybody that has a skill that we may not possess and just go, oh, it's a gift. They have it, I don't.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah, totally. That's how we get out of being responsible for what we've got.
Yep. Yep.
Totally just a way of avoiding responsibility.
Such a good point, though, to hear that someone like Steve Jobs, who, you do just go, he's got it, right? He's
Dude,
the
I mean,
ultimate marketer. He's, whatever. But at the same time, and when you're saying an hour, you're talking out loud practice, meaning if it's a
yeah,
14-minute
on the
speech.
stage,
Yeah.
on the stage, looking out because he knows he's got all the fanboys over here. He knows all the haters are over there. He
Yep.
knows all the, so he knows exactly where everybody is. He's thinking about exactly what he's saying to whom. And for a 45-minute speech,
Yep.
he stands on stage and practices it for 45 hours.
Wow. Over the course of months. Over the
Oh
course of
yeah,
months.
over the
Yeah.
course of months or a month or whatever.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I love this saying, yipe, YIPE. Your impression equals your performance times your exposure. And here's what I mean. The impression that you make on the higher ups at your company, the impression that Steve Jobs makes on the entire world and the market, anybody's impression is their performance, all the hard work they're doing. That's 98% of everything you do, right? All the hard work, all the behind the scenes, all the time you're spending doing that work, multiplied by this brief moment of exposure.
Right.
Right. Even if it's a 45-minute speech, that is a really, really brief bit of what everything that happened that year. Right.
Right.
But all that hard work times that moment of exposure. So if that moment of exposure is a 0.5 and you're doing $1 million work, now everybody thinks you're doing $500,000 work.
Right.
But if you're doing $1 million work and that exposure is a 10, well, now everybody looks at you like somebody who's doing $10 million work.
Right.
And you have control of that.
Well, I have to think some of your core people that you would work with as individuals would then be pre-IPO companies, people
Yes,
going out for fundraising.
Tons of pitch coaching.
Yeah, because how do you...
Authors,
Authors would be great.
Pitch coaching is key.
Yeah. I mean, because the ability for an entrepreneur to actually tell their story in a concise story, in a way that's going to pull at heartstrings, in a way that's going to ultimately open people's wallets is critical.
Well, and what you just said is what most really serious entrepreneurs are trying to avoid. They're like,
right.
Oh, I pull at their heartstrings. What do you mean?
Right.
Well, so here's what I say. Communicating with human beings is not logical. Period. It's not logical. It's biological.
Right.
Because the logical brain is wrapped around the outside of the emotional brain. So if somebody likes our product and all that, we get, yes, we like it. Yes, it's priced right. Yes, it would make a difference. No, we're not ready to buy it yet. Okay, that's yes, 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 no. Why do they do that? It's logic, emotion. We didn't make the emotional connection that would get us that fourth and most important yes.
Right.
Because and many people are trying to purposefully not do that because the VCs told them, oh, we're sharks, don't try and touch our heartstrings, just give us the facts, But they're lying.
Right.
Because
they're human. Exactly.
Yeah,
they're human.
Totally human beings.
So they want to like you. Exactly. They want to like you. They want to feel good. They want to, whatever you're doing that's going to matter. They want to feel good about the partnership. Now, they also are going to want their facts, of course.
Of course.
But it's got to be blended with that emotional piece.
I say logic is necessary.
Yes.
That great business plan, all the facts, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient.
Right.
Anyone who thinks logic by itself should win, well, maybe it should, but that doesn't matter in this world where we live.
Right.
Anybody who thinks logic should win is just never going to be as effective as somebody who gets there's more to communicating with human beings than just logic.
Totally. I mean, how many sales reps, myself included back in the day, have made pitches where you go, I absolutely crushed that because I said everything I was supposed to say and the way I was supposed to say it, and no one seemed to give a shit at the end, and nobody bought anything I was selling. And I'm following up and they're blowing me off. And I don't really understand why because I thought it was textbook, but they were never really bought in emotionally.
They
Right.
never, yeah, we didn't give them that chance to emotionally connect. So their logical brain might have liked it. The logical brain might have been yes, yes, yes.
Yeah.
But man, then it's got to go through that emotional brain that we have not put at ease yet. We haven't gotten in the same tribe together. We haven't connected with it. And so it's going to say, we're not ready yet.
Totally. And that's I would imagine as you're coaching people, whether it's on a speech, a pitch, whatever it is, that it's make the emotional connection first before you even start bringing out the facts because no one's listening to facts when they're not connected, right? It's just in one ear, out the other.
Till you make an emotional connection, all the
Yeah.
logic in the world just bounces off. And Ken, I'll give you one of my little secrets here. I call it the opening the laptop story. When I sit down to pitch, I bring my laptop, right? We connect it up to the screen. And then I say, as I'm opening the laptop here and getting PowerPoint up, let me just tell you where this whole thing came from. And it seems like a little throwaway story that's
But
just
that's the
filling
pitch.
time,
Yeah, yeah.
but that's the real pitch.
Yeah.
That's what gets us the yes, 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 that fourth yes, right? That's what allows them, if they like all the logic, to say yes.
I think it's you've disarmed them a bit. It's like while I'm opening the laptop. In other words, I'm not selling you right now. We're not in that thing
Right.
yet,
Yeah.
right? We're just
Yeah.
in the before the sale thing. So before we get into the sale thing, I'm just going to talk to you about
Totally.
how I got here and all that. And in the meantime, you're saying everything you want to say, right? Because
Exactly.
they're
Exactly.
loose. They're ready to receive that information.
Totally.
Very cool.
And the other thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately, and I was actually kind of happy to see her get a significant prison sentence, is Elizabeth Holmes, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
because one of the problems that I bump into doing what I do is that, and I think I get it. People don't want to do that. They're like, oh, Elizabeth Holmes. But how I think about it is that the dark side already knows these tools. And the
Right.
dark side uses these tools all the time, right?
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that we shouldn't use a lightsaber.
Right.
It just means we got to use the lightsaber for the light side of the force instead of the dark side of the force, right?
Right.
And we, so I call it, the difference for me is when you're being selfish and you're being inauthentic, that whole thing, you're using these tools, but you're selfish and inauthentic. That's called manipulation.
Totally.
And we don't do that. Like, people
Totally.
hate that. And that
Right.
is not part of anything I do. That is
Right.
completely removed. The other side, when we make that emotional connection and we're authentic and we're genuine and we actually do connect, that's called influence.
Absolutely.
And people don't want to be manipulated, but they don't mind. They actually they're down for influence, right?
Absolutely. When we're in a situation, even yourself, you know all of this and you know what people are doing sometimes when they're doing it, right? Like if someone's trying to set you up for a pitch, at the same time, you're like, fine, if you're going to take me in a direction, go ahead and take me there. I mean, I think most leaders don't mind being followers
No.
if they're following someone who's leading correctly, right? Who's taking them where they need to go, who's influencing them in an authentic way, like you're saying. And
Yeah,
so,
totally.
sorry, I'm in New York, so welcome to
Yeah, don't worry.
sirens and dogs and everything else.
First responders and dogs. I love them all. Yeah.
Can't get away from it. Awesome. So I wanted to ask you just about some of your most memorable speeches because I've clicked on a couple. I saw, what's the largest crowd that you've ever spoken to before?
It was, what they tell me is it was 700,000 people.
How did that happen, and where was that? What were you?
Yeah,
What did you talk about? Yeah.
So it was a group that was looking for international speakers, and they vetted a bunch of speakers and then invited a number of us. And, I didn't get paid. I actually made a contribution to the orphanage there. And it was not the richest ashram and the most prestigious ashram. That's why I wanted to go there. And so I talked about, I put two things together that I think go together pretty well. In 3 minutes, you basically have one message. I sort of broke that rule a little bit, but what I talked about is, I invoked one of their heroes, Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, right at the beginning of the talk, and said that he was somebody who knew the value and importance of protecting and honoring women. And, and I asked them to honor his memory by committing to protecting and honoring women. And then I talked about the fact that anywhere on earth you measure, on any measure that matters to human beings, wherever women are doing better, everything's doing better. The environment, animals, the
Yep.
economy, children, even men are doing better wherever women are doing better. And then I asked people to include themselves when they say we are one, because that was the theme of the whole thing. And I think we leave ourselves out sometimes. We're like, we are one, but I'm not good enough,
Right.
And so I encourage people to live as the person that the people who love them think they are. Those people who light up when you're around,
Yeah.
Ken, and those people who just genuinely want the best for you. Who you are is not who you think you are.
Right.
Who you are is who they think you are, because that's how you actually show up in the world.
Right.
So if you're having a bad day and you're thinking, getting down on yourself and you think you're not good enough, remember there's all those people that you love and respect who think you're actually freaking awesome, and just be that guy, whether you believe it or not.
Yeah, I've told people before, isn't it, or suggested that they think about, if we think about the way we talk to ourselves, and if one of those people you're talking about, your spouse, your best friend, whoever,
Yeah.
if they ever heard someone talking to us the way that we talk to ourselves, sometimes they'd wipe them out.
They
I mean,
totally would.
and yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, I love that. So how did that feel anyway, talking to 700,000 people? I mean, was that pretty nerve wracking, or did you feel all right? Like, what was it like?
Well, when I went up on stage, so we were on stage. There were a whole bunch of other people on stage. The whole place was just chaos because it's India, and as I was going up, one of the guys that was kind of part of the show was like, I think we might be losing the crowd. You've really got to get them back.
Oh my gosh.
Now, here's probably why, because these speeches weren't translated. And most of the people spoke English okay, but I don't know that they were getting every word of this. The speeches were translated on screens, but they'd moved all the screens out to the furthest edges so the people that were way out there could be a part of it. But the people inside the tent right where I was, they didn't see the written translation.
Right.
So, they were a little squirmy and stuff. So, there was some anxiety.
Right.
And I actually wrote up a little quick, breakdown of it. I said, the one thing I wish I would not have done is take my paper up there, because I was good to go. I could have done that without the paper. But the people who were running the event were insisting that we take the paper up there, So just out of respect, I took it up there. But then it was like a magnet for my eyes. I didn't need it, but I kept looking at it. So I wish I wouldn't have done that. However, I was really proud of the fact that I took that message there, because it turns out that we were more rural than I had really realized going in. And we were in an area in India where some of the men still grope women just because they can,
Wow.
So
Was that received okay because of the political climate there, and just their not political, but I mean, I guess just the way they are socially and where they're at,
yeah.
cultural climate, yeah.
Well, the women loved it.
Yeah, of course. That's good.
And I think there were probably some men that might have been like, yeah, whatever. But
Right.
I think that it was a great shout out of support to the women, and they got it. Like, I had one woman who ran the ashram pulled me down and just said, "Thank you," about 50 times.
That's
That
so
was
cool.
so good. That was so important. Thank you, And then a number of other women really resonated, and I think probably a majority of the men,
Of course.
probably
yeah.
a vast majority of the men resonated with that. And now hopefully they've got one more thing in their quiver to help them stand up for treating women well,
No, that's so cool. That's so cool. What the scene reminded me of, because I watched it, when you went up there, the movie Forrest Gump?
Yeah.
Remember when Forrest becomes accidentally they shove him up on stage to talk about the war in Vietnam? That's what that stage looked like, right? They're just like, go up there and talk, and you're like, hey, here we go. And except you were ready, obviously,
festival and everything's going on. It's all crazy.
You're elbow to elbow with the other speakers up there,
Totally.
So I thought that was really cool. Well, John, thank you so much, and we'll make sure to put ways that people can get in touch with you in our show notes, because I'd love for some of our executives, some of our audience to dive a little deeper in your courses as well. Yeah. Anything you'd like to close out with, or anything you'd like to add for our audience before we get going?
Yeah, so two big things. I would like LinkedIn is where I put the vast majority of my energy. So if people want to see some of my content, go to John Bates. It's, linkedin.com/in/John Bates. Okay. And you can connect with me there. You can reach out to me there. I've got a team monitoring my inbox, so I'm never late anymore. Cool. And that's where I put up a lot of my content. That's my preferred channel. And then I would be happy to give you a coupon for your listeners so awesome. They could get a short course that I've done about doing a TED Talk. And nice. So it's a little bit about what to know about TEDx organizers, and like it's stuff like, don't be a prima donna speaker, because there's no way you'll ever get on the stage. Remember, these people are all volunteers. They're not making money on this. So you acting like a prima donna is like the kiss of death for ever giving a TED Talk, because all the TEDx organizers know each other. So there's, so it's sort of some inside dope. And then one of the most valuable things ever out of the work that I've done with TED and the stuff that I've brought out of that world, I broke down all of the TED commandments. So there are 10 TED commandments, and they are freaking brilliant. And if you apply them and use them in any speech, anywhere, any conference, it will make your speech vastly better. Going back to what we talked about at the beginning, one of those things is, thou shalt not just tell us the good stuff, right? Right. Tell us about the difficulty and the dark nights of the soul. So they're really actively pushing people to be insightful and vulnerable. In fact, I came up with a term. Will you put a TM on it for me? I'm working on this. Insightful vulnerability. It took me more than a decade to find that term, but it's not just about vulnerability for vulnerability's sake. It's insightful vulnerability.
Right. What am I going to get from this vulnerability? Right.
Exactly.
I had someone coin a term, not to go off separately here, but it was, he had kind of the opposite, where you know how sometimes people will not stop sharing. And you're like, yes. It's not insightful anymore, right? You're like, there's not a point to it, right?
Right.
And it was, and I forgot what it was, but anyway, sorry. We will definitely share that coupon
and I'll make
code.
It free. I'll make it free for your listeners.
Awesome. Very cool.
And then if they want to do the full on Speak Like a Leader boot camp, I can promise any human being listening right now that will be one of the best $875 that you have ever spent in your life.
Amazing.
And it will make an ongoing difference for you until the absolute end of your days.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, I'm definitely sure we'll have some people that want to jump into that. John, it was so good to meet you. I really appreciate you coming on today and dealing with my dog and New York sirens and everything else that we have going on. Nice to meet you, man.
It's great to meet you too. I love dogs. And I do love first responders, especially in New York. So
Very cool.
They're welcome. They're welcome on my episode.
Very cool. Talk to you soon, John. Take care.
Have a good one, Ken.